Good morning to all of you, ambassadors. I'm very pleased to have your presence, particular preference to representatives from the three most affected countries, also journalists and colleagues from the UN system. Beyond the death toll of the current outbreak of the Ebola virus disease, we know that the impacts are not just related to the epidemiological aspects, but also to the socio-economic aspects. So we are very pleased to present you a report that does justice, in our opinion, to the full extent of the impact, and has conclusions that are a bit more comprehensive than what you have seen in different studies so far, presented by many institutions for two reasons. The first reason is that this study is actually based on ground research. This is not a study that has remotely tried to access some data. This is a study that is the result of 8 missions to these 3 countries, including by myself. And it is also a study that actually relies heavily on the information that is available by the national authorities of the 3 countries. So we are really very grateful for their collaboration and their engagement at the highest level, because they saw the opportunity also of telling their own story and their own narrative, which I think is very important. Most of the studies on the socio-economic impact have been very partial. They have not been comprehensive. And they have focused a lot on projections of GDP. Although we believe the projections on GDP are extremely important and relevant, and a number of premises have to be taken into account when you are doing forecasting, the experience tells us that in the aftermath of major disruptions in one country's economy, it is very difficult to have good forecasts. The forecasts tend to be either exaggerated or off the mark for a variety of reasons. We don't have enough data information or data quality to be able to have a very good forecast. And most of the cases, the forecasts have been based on softwares like the linkage model that have proven quite off track in terms of having a good prediction in cases such as the tsunami, big changes that you are all familiar with, or the Haiti earthquake. So we have decided that it was not a very good course of action to focus our study on GDP forecasts. Instead, our study gives you the status of various forecasters' predictions in relation to the 3 most affected countries and somehow to the rest of the continent. And what we found is that most of the changes that these various forecasters are already doing in the course of just 6 months proves our point. That almost every other month they have to revise their own forecasts. So instead of giving you forecasts alone, which we do in the study, we also give you what would be the consequences in the worst case scenario from our perspective. And the worst case scenario from our perspective is basically 0 growth for the 3 countries, which we don't think it will be the case exactly, but if that was to happen, we give you an idea of what the consequences would be for them and for the continent. For them, we go into the details of the social impact that will be provoked, and of course a number of policy recommendations. For the rest of the continent, we are obliged to admit that the size of the economies of the 3 countries being so small, the impact is going to be extremely reduced. In fact, if we had 0 growth in the 3 countries, as I said, is not yet what is predicted, by most forecasters, including the national authorities, we will be talking about an impact in the West Africa region in the range of 0.19%. And we will be talking about an impact in the rest of Africa of 0.05%. So extremely small impact. However, we also do an assessment of the impact in terms of perception. And impact in terms of perception, unfortunately, can be much higher than the real GDP growth impact, because it can affect a number of decisions that economic actors may have been considering, such as investment related, but also it can affect issues such as tourism and travel big time, and this is also assessed in the study. I wanted to give you what I consider to be the most important recommendation that we make. We make a few recommendations on the epidemiological aspect, also on the social, on the economic, and on what we call intangible. But the most important recommendation for me, and this is what I would like our colleagues from the press to retain, is that we are asking for debt cancellation for these three countries. Now, this is something that has been considered in the aftermath of major countries in crisis. We look at the volumes of that, and we believe that they are not significant. The international community has already pledged in excess of $3 billion for these countries for the response. So debt cancellation will be a fraction of that. We have looked into the announcements made by the IMF at the G20 recent meeting in Brisbane, Australia, and also the announcements made by the World Bank. We welcome those developments because of the impact they will have in the deficits of public income that are going to occur in these three countries. But we think the international community, in light of the major mobilization that we have witnessed, should consider one more ambitious step, and that would be cancellation of the debt for the three countries. And if we were to do that, we believe that we are going to create the conditions for the post-Ebola, not for the Ebola, but for the post-Ebola, because it will allow these countries to really start with a more clean slate from a macroeconomic dimension that is going to be essential given what they are going through right now and all the deviations of public expenditure that were provoked by the epidemiological response needs. So if we are going in that direction, we believe that the international community will really be doing something that should not be used as a precedent to be necessarily copied elsewhere, because we know that the scale of the problem in these three countries is so significant in the world attention that it deserves something that is quite dramatic, and that's what we are actually suggesting. Before I give the floor to others, I just wanted to pay tribute to the courage of our colleagues from ECA that went and worked there in many missions. I think they have proven that the perception about what this country's situation is wrong. Like I like to say, it's not just that we have life after Ebola. We have life with Ebola. These countries continue to work, continue to operate, businesses operating, all things that you would expect in terms of economic activity are obviously disrupted, but not ground to a halt. So we should not look at these countries as if they were paralyzed. There is life with Ebola, and it's very important for us to retain that, because I think otherwise we will do injustice and will just propagate the stigma that is being, as you know, expanding more and more. But this being said, we also consider it very important for the correct news to emerge, and that's why I think this report is going to be a good contribution. It's very thorough. It will be a good contribution to have the narrative right, So I urge all of you in your different capacities, our colleagues from the UN system, because they are working on this issue in many fronts, all the embassies, because I know that each and every country in the world is paying attention to Ebola, but also the journalists to try to make sure that the right story gets propagated, and that we are going to have, in relation to Ebola, not speculation, but rather very accurate information that we try to provide with this report. So I really thank you for your presence. Once again, my colleague Dimitri Sanga was the leader of this report preparation and the missions. He's here, and together with him, we'll try to also answer some of your questions and concerns. Thank you very much.